Hello everybody. If this is your first time here, welcome. If not, welcome back. Good to see you. We're on the Great Card Quest. This is show number 8, so we're moving it right along. We are advancing towards building the entire 1971 Topps Black Beauty, the black border set. You'll see a ton of cards today. Very difficult set to build. It's going to be PSA 7 and above. You've probably heard this if you watch every show. This is your 8th time. But as for the new viewers, I'd like to kind of level set everybody where we're at. So this is going to be a quest to get to 752, and then that's the basic set. The master set has 761 cards with 9 variations. So I'm also attempting that. I have 5 of the 9 variations currently. So 4 of them are still eluding me out there, but some of them are very tough to find. And in previous shows, we've covered some of the variations. And in this show, we're going to cover 369, which is the checklist, which is 2 different variations. So it's very cool. So we'll get to that eventually. But I want to go through some of the... I'm not going to go through all 50 cards because we'll be here all night. But some of the key cards from this range. So this range is going to be 325 to 374. So we're working our way through the set. There's 752, so we're just about, we're about halfway there. So hang with us and we'll get there. And then once I finish this set, we're going to have a video of the finished set and a big champagne popping thing, and we're going to go crazy. So it'll be fun. But a lot of help doing this, so I appreciate everybody that's out there. We are in, once again, I must not have screwed it up last time because Dan from Indiana has let me back into his man cave. Dan's once again sitting in the background, trying to chime in when he can, I hope, with some details. And he should know some of these cards. There's some pretty popular guys in this range. So we're going to go through these. I'm going to give you some facts. I'm going to give you some numbers. Now remember, there was hundreds of thousands of these graded, and there's only 252 tens in the whole, like 260,000 cards graded. So they're very hard to get and very hard to find. I don't have any of them yet, but I'll give you some of the pricing on them just so you get a range of what, say, a 10 would be worth in these. And the very first card we have does have a 10, so I'll give that secret away for you. All right, so the first card is, everyone who watched should know, this card number 325. This is 7. Giants pitcher Juan Marichal. All right, great pitcher in his time. If you remember, his big distinction was he had that giant, huge leg kick. Okay, not unlike Louis Tiant, who turned his back to the batter. Mr. Marichal brought his leg up giantly high, and it really distracted the batters and made him crazy. But he was a heck of a pitcher. 14 seasons with the Giants, 1960 to 1973. He threw a no-hitter against, once again, one of my favorite team names, the Houston Colt 45s. I brought it up in prior shows. I just think it's a great name. He had a great career, 243 wins, 142 losses, 2,303 strikeouts, and a 2.989 ERA. And he was elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 1983. So, and numbers wise, I promise you that, there's 319 sevens. So what that means is, because a lot of people ask me, why is there some of the lower stars only have 80 or 90 sevens and Juan has 319? Well, logic is that he's a star. People know his card's worth a lot, so they send a lot more of his cards in to be graded than someone on the lower end of the spectrum. So that's why you'll see, like, the stars have a ton more, but yet they're worth more because they're stars. So it's kind of a weird dichotomy there. There's 319 sevens, 264 eights, 23 nines, and there is 110, and that sold for $8,365 on August 20th, 2015. So that's pretty cool. All right. Next is, now There's actually 8 of these cards, and I just using one as an example. This is card 329, and they kind of featured the AL Championship Series and the World Series, and they kind of picked out highlights, and they did a cool, neat little picture of some of the stars and things. Like this is Frank Robinson shows muscle. So there's like 8 of these. I just showing you one as an example. Frank Robinson was a great player. I mean, he was awesome. Numbers wise, 209 sevens, 216 eights, 23 nines. There is a 10, but I could not find a sale, probably in the last 20 years. So whoever's sitting on the 10 of that card, it's somewhere in somebody's basement and they're not moving it. God love them. I don't know why you would. So, all right, next, if you at all were a rival of the Mets, you will know this man. And if you were a Met fan, of course. This is card number 335. This is 7. Mr. Jerry Koosman. All right, and he's actually a tough card to get. There's a bunch of them. I mean, there's not a ton of them, but this was an expensive card for being Jerry Koosman. He was a good pitcher, but he's not like a Seaver or a Ryan or anything like that, or even a Doc Gooden type thing. So Jerry Koosman. So what about Jerry? Oh, yeah, thank you, Dan. Jim Palmer. Spent 19 seasons in Major League Baseball. They called him the Coos. So, but his long and short of it is he had a good, solid career. He wasn't spectacular, but he ended up, a 222 and 209 record, close to 500, a 3.35 IRA, but he did play in 612 games. So, he had a nice career, but he used to just absolutely annihilate the Cubs. I just remember that. I'd see Jerry Koosman pitching, and I'm like, oh, here we go. So, and I'm from Chicago area, as you know from probably prior shows. And if you don't, now you do. So I'm a big Cub Sox fan freak. That's a Sox hat. That should have been a tip-off right there. I've got to make sure I wear the Cubs hats and the Sox hats equally. And I have 17 shows, so I got to make sure I spread it out. So far, it's been 2 Sox and 1 Cub, so it's time to flip it around and get a Cub hat in there. The next one, once again, for new viewers, I just throw in kind of neat cards that I think are cool names. They may not have done a lot, or they're associated with something cool. So this one is card number 337. I don't have this card yet, so if you see a card that's not in a holder, as I said, I'm building it. I'm 80% done with the set, but I'm still building it. So sometimes I have to pull a card out of my raw set that I built from scratch. I have a complete 752 raw set, which means they're not graded, for those of you that don't do a lot with the grading world. So the Astros, this was Jesus Alou, one of the famous Alou brothers. Matty Alou, all the Alous. So he didn't do anything spectacular, but just he's an Alou brother. So he needs to be recognized. And for example, now you saw that there was all those Marichals, right? This card, this is the example I'm talking about. He's not a great star, and there's only 76 sevens, 108 eights, 6 nines, and no 10s. So sometimes we're going to get to a card later in the set, number 577, who was just kind of an ordinary player, but there's very few of them, and he costs a fortune. He's like a common, but he warrants the same price as like a Lou Brock or a Seaver, just because of scarcity of the card. So it's kind of a weird, and as you know, I know this set pretty well. The next one is card number 338. He was a catcher for the Athletics, Gene Tennis. If you've watched baseball back then, you'd have heard of Mr. Tennis. He has a 10 also, which we'll get to in a minute. He was a catcher and a first baseman. He won a ton of stuff with the A's. He won World Series in 72, 73, 74, and 82. So he had a great career. And he ended with titles with the Toronto Blue Jays in 1992 and 1993. So he just was one of those players that just was on teams that won. So God love him. But here's an interesting fact. There's 105 sevens, 113 eights, 6 nines, and there's 110. And that 110 sold for $2,000 on November 2nd of 2017. So you've got a player that didn't do a lot stats-wise, won a bunch of titles, and his card sold for a pretty penny, about $2,000. So not comparative to some of the other ones, but you'll see as we get there. Next one, my name is Rilio Mastrantonio, so I love this. Rico Petrocelli. Love the name. He was a good player too. Number 340 is a 7 with the Boston Red Sox. All right. He was a shortstop. Played quite a bit. And Rico's pretty cool. He never quite made the big Hall of Fame. He was inducted into the Boston Red Sox Hall of Fame in 1997. So he was good enough to do that. His first name was really Americo. So Americo Peter Petrocelli. So they called him Rico for the Rico, I guess. In the Boston in 1967, they had a team called the Impossible Dream Team, and he was a kind of a key member of that. So that's kind of his claim to fame. He had a decent career, nothing spectacular, but he's good enough to be in the Boston Hall of Fame. So it's not bad with some of the players they had in Boston. All right, and just numbers wise, I want to point out there is a 10. He has only 99 sevens. That's a tough card to get. 141 eights, 11 nines, and there's 110, and that sold for $2,500 on March 22nd of 2018. So you could see that tennis went for $2,000. Petrocelli, he's in the Boston Hall of Fame, went for $2,500. So a lot of it's demand, a lot of it's city, but I think career-wise, Rico had a little better career, but tennis won everything, so that's probably why his card's worth a lot. Next one. Watch this guy growing up. Loved him. You'll know him if you're a Dodgers fan or a San Diego Padres fan. Probably guess who it is already. Number 341, Steve Garvey. This is a 7 also. Mr. Garvey broke my heart in 1984 when he was with the Padres. They knocked us out of the playoffs. Not a happy camper, but still have respect for Mr. Garvey. And you're going to wait to hear the 10, what his 10 is worth. There's 2 of them out there. He holds the National League record for the most consecutive games played at 1,207. Obviously, we all know who has the American League record and the record. You know who that is, of course. I don't even just say it, Mr. Ripken. He took over when Bill Buckner departed L.A., so he took over for him, which is kind of neat. And then he ended up being a Cub and then a Boston Red Sox. So that's a claim to fame. Mr. Garvey had a great career. Watched him grow up. He had that like stone iron jaw, like something out of like Dash Riprock on the Flintstones. I mean, he just had that jaw. So, and interesting enough, there's a bunch of his cards out. There's 824 sevens, 574 eights, 37 nines, and there's 2 10s. Now, there's not many that have 2 10s out there. I think he's only one of like 2 or 3 guys that have 2 10s. And his card sold for $25,000, his 10, one of the 10s, $25,393.20 back on May 20th, 2012. So you can see that he's pretty much a stud. So, he had 2,599 hits. He was at 272 home runs. So he was a great, but he never hit that real superstar level. But he was a heck of a player, and I watched him a lot as a kid. Next, near and dear to my heart, White Sox. Card 345, 7, Joe Horlin. All right. He was a pitcher for the White Sox, amongst others. He's the only player to play on a team that won a Pony League World Series in 1952, a College World Series, and the Major League World Series in 1972. So that's his claim to fame, basically. He's kind of a 3-time winner in 3 different levels, which is kind of cool. And I'll be honest with you, before I did research, I did not know there was a Pony League World Series in 1952. But there was, so now you know. But he had a nice career. I mean, he finished out. Numbers-wise, It's a little tough card to get. There's only 92 of these 7s, so I had to hunt around for that a little bit. 218 8s. So, but yet the 8s are way more because they're graded higher, but there's 2 times the number of 8s that there is to 7s. So by all logic, the 8s should be cheaper than the 7s, but they're not because it's graded 8 and it's a little better card. Because a lot of the philosophy is, and I'm beginning to believe this after doing this set, is a lot of people say you should buy the card, not the grade. So, you know, that's something to think about. You could have a marginal 7 that you could pay $30 for, or you can get a different 7 that's a $45 card, but it's well centered. Because PSA, as you know, all grading services, they go all over the place. You got, like, this one's centered but not, you'll see in the pic, you saw in the picture before, it's centered but not perfectly centered. I'm sure there's one out there that's even more centered that's a 7. So if you really want to dig in and go for the best looking set you can, you buy the card, not the grade. So I try to do that when possible, but sometimes it's so hard to find these cards that you got to take what you can get at some point. And you could swap them out later. As my friend Dan knows, once I finish this set, you know I'm not going to be happy with just this set. Would you agree? There's going to be some upgrades. You know it's
your wife will let you go any further.
I think you're right. I think I'll have to cut it off, but you know I want to pick up.
She'll cut it off.
Yeah, exactly. Good one, Dan. Oh, here's a special card. You guys are gonna like this, especially from Chicago. This is card number 350, and remember, interesting fact about that. This is 350. They tried to take some of the stars and make them in round numbers. So, for example, Johnny Bench is 250. Why Nolan Ryan is 513, I don't know. But most of the major stars, they tried to give a whole number to. So that's an interesting factoid. So Billy Williams is 350 because he was a heck of a player. And he was a Cub. This is a 7. It's card number 350. Near and dear to my heart. Watch Billy growing up. Jim Hickman and all those guys, and Billy Williams and Glenn Becker and Don Kessinger. So just absolutely love it. But he had one of the best swings out there if you watched him. He was the 61 National League Rookie of the Year. He was on a team with Fergie Jenkins, Ernie Banks later in his career, and he was just amazing. He was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1987. There's a good amount of them out there. So this card, believe it or not, it's not too expensive because there's 253 7s, 237 8s, and 19 9s. So there's a decent supply of Billy out there. But he's a Cub. Gotta love it. Even though I'm wearing a Sox hat. But I root for both. Next is card number 354. A pitcher for the Giants, Don McMahon. You remember his name. He's not a household name, but he was very solid. I remember watching him a bit when I grew up. He was 18 years in the league. He at one time he led for beating people. He had the highest winning percentage and had the most people hit. So that's something kind of cool. And there's a decent amount of them out there. There's 110 7s, 197 8s. Once again, more 8s than 7s. Yet I paid more for that. I don't understand it. 18 9s and 0 10s.
Is that Jim McMahon's dad?
It is not, but that's a good guess. Jim McMahon's dad. I like it. Or maybe it is, and we don't know. If you're watching. Just kidding. All right. Next one, I don't have this card, and you'll see some cards I don't have yet, because I'm like 80% on my way through the set. So I had a raw set, and this one is the card, just not in a PSA, but I'll get it eventually, and then we're going to have a big celebration. But this is card number 355, and if you, once again, were a rival of the Mets or a Mets fan, you know this name, Bud Harrelson. He was a shortstop, just a gritty kind of player. Loved watching him play when I grew up. He's pretty cool. He basically, I was on that Miracle Mets '69 team that totally the Cubs collapsed. I don't want to bring up bad memories for those of you out there. I was a little young in '69, so thank God I don't remember that collapse. but I've watched the films. I've heard about it. My relatives have talked about it forever. Oh, they were winning, and they're up by like what, Dan, 18 games or something, or 16 games, and they just choked it away. It's bad. But Mr. Harrelson, the reason I say he's gritty is because kind of one of his shining moments was when he got in a brawl with Pete Rose in Game 3 of the 1973 National League Championship Series. They went at it hard on the field. And I do remember seeing, I don't know if I saw the highlight or seeing that, but yeah, that was quite a thing. So he went on to do everything. He went on to be a coach, a special instructor, a broadcaster, a manager, all within the Mets organization. So Bud was a longtime Met. Numbers-wise, nothing spectacular. 138 sevens, 146 eights, 10 nines, and no 10s. All right, this is a name you guys might all remember. It's card number 360. It's a 7. Mr. Jim Fregosi. I remember more as a manager than a player. Probably most of you do. But he would be in that dugout, and they'd show the shot on him. It'd be cool. He played on 4 different teams. Did nothing spectacular. Like I said, I remember him more as a manager. But the neat thing about him is he has a 10. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. So he has 141 sevens, 121 eights, 10 nines. He has a 10, but there has not been any sales for that 10. So whoever had that graded got that locked up somewhere deep and dark, and that hasn't been put on the market yet. So that's interesting because there's only 252 10s. So you could literally not even build a 10 set. It's virtual of PSAs. There might be other ones out there, BGS or or the other grading companies. But if you wanted to have a PSA set of 10s, unless you went back and found a caseload of packs somewhere and had them graded and they were 10s, you could only get about 252 of them. And it would cost you a lot. I mean, the average card price is probably, based on what I've seen from the 10s, the average card price is probably $4 or $5 grand a card. So you're talking quite a chunk of change. I find that fascinating. You take the later sets, like the 75 set, the 78 set, the 79 set. You see a lot of those, not a lot, but you see a lot of 10 sets of those because they had the multicolored border, the 75 sets, if you remember, if you're into cards, and they had a little chipping on the sides. But all the white white sets, they all are easier to build higher sets because they don't show the chipping like the black and the colored ones. So basically, that's kind of it. A little aside for you. I try to throw in tidbits as we go here. For those of you that want to build sets, I've been doing it for a long time, and it takes quite a bit of organization, and I'll have a whole separate show just on organizing everything and how I take cards from my raw set and put it in. I have binders, and I have this and that, and I have lists, and I check the lists, and my wife just looks at me like I'm crazy, but whatever. So the next one. This guy is infamous. He had a great career. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1998, so he had a great career, but it's a weird career. If you remember, you're a Dodgers fan or you played in watched the National League, card number 361, I don't have it yet in PSA 7 or above, but Don Sutton. All right, good old Don. He's a little younger here. I remember when he had that, later on he had that like gray, curly, kind of like fro-y hair. That was later in his career, but he was kind of young there. But some interesting facts on Don. Okay, he holds the most, let me say this right. The record for most losses to one team, 13 to the Chicago Cubs. Yay. Of course, that makes me happy. So that's one weird fact about him. But he had, a ton of all-star selections, and he also had the most at-bats of a pitcher, 1,354 without a home run. So he batted 1,354 times, because obviously the DH was AL, not NL. and he never had a home run. But he had a solid career, 324 wins, 256 losses, 3,574 strikeouts, 3.26 ERA, and he was elected to the Hall of Fame. He has no tens. He has 238 sevens, 315 eights, and 16 nines. So, honestly, I should have him by now. I'm ashamed of myself. I haven't just pulled the trigger because I'm trying to get him as low as possible. But he's not a tough card to get. I mean, you can pick him up now for like 50, 60 bucks if you're looking hard. I'm just trying to wait and get it lower because when you build this set, every penny counts. So you try to save where you can. But I'll get down eventually here. All right, now the fun part. These are the variations. So like I said before, the origin of the set, and you've heard this, if you've watched the previous shows. If not, I'll fill you in if you're a new viewer. What happened is they printed the first series. So that was basically 1 through 522, I want to say, somewhere in that range. They printed out a jillion of those, okay? Then they printed the second series, but then they started just barely printing football at the same time. So they cut that, they're called semi-high numbers. They're 523 through 644. 643, sorry. So 523 to 643. So those are the semi-high numbers. So there's less of those, maybe like 70, like a quarter less. Then football season really got into gear, and they printed a third series that are the high numbers. That's 645 to 752. So there's 50% less of those cards out than any other card. So my interim objective here is to finish the high number series. So I have the 108 high numbers. I am down to needing 11. So once I finish the high number series, that'll be a big thing off the plate. But where I'm leading to this is, what they would do is, they would see errors in the first series, and then they would try to fix them in the second series. And they saw errors in the second series, and they try to fix them in the third series. And sometimes they didn't have the technology we have today, so they did their best job. Like if you remember way back in show number 2, Boots Day has the stadium light behind his ear, and then he tried to wash that out, and you could kind of still see the stadium light. They made their best effort. But in this case, and then you're going to look at some checklists. But what this means is there's 9 variations out there, as I said in the beginning, and that's called a master set. So when you have 752 is the whole base set. Then you have 9 more cards that they tried to fix, basically, or variations of the original card, or changed. And there's 9 of those, and that becomes the master set. So here's a big chunk of them right here. So I'm going to show them to you. Okay, there's 3 different. This is card number 369. It's a checklist, and those checklists are hard to find because, like, when I was little, I'd fill in the little numbers with a pen, right? So most of these cards were trashed. And then when you get the high number checklist, there's 50% less of those printed, plus all the kids and adults are like scratching out the card. So these are kind of tough to find. I'm looking for the card 619 is a semi-high number. And man, there's 3 of those, and I've got 1, and I can't find the other 2 to save my life because I don't know where they're at. So anybody has out there, let me know. All right, so this is an interesting set of 3. Okay, the first one you have is this checklist for cards 394 to 523. Why it's card 369, I don't know, but whatever. You'd think they'd have it within the range of the cards. I guess they have to do it in advance. But this is the one with the orange helmet. Okay, that's variation 1. All right, so I'm going to stand that up there just for now. The second variation is, and I'm going to ask you when this pops up on the screen to take a look above the player's ear on the helmet. There's a little line on the bottom of the helmet above the ear. Okay, so this is red helmet with line. Okay, so that's a second. So for some reason they printed one variation of the orange helmet, then they switch it to a red helmet and they put a little line above the ear. Okay, then in their infinite wisdom, they printed one with a red helmet with no line above the ear on the helmet. So those three are the three variations for that card. So in order for you to have a master set, you have to have all three of those cards. Any one of them will suffice for the base set, but if you want the master, that's it. So the next big chunker like that is coming up way ahead, many shows ahead in 619. But we'll get to that, and hopefully by then I'll have them all, but good luck. And by the way, just numbers-wise, to give you an idea, the orange helmet, there's only 96 sevens, 112 eights, 4 nines. It gets even worse. The red helmet with no line, there is 53 sevens only. So that's a vicious card to get. It's easier to get an 8. There's 117 eights, 7 nines. And these are all sevens. So, and then you're probably wondering, what about the third one? Okay, the same numbers practically, you believe it or not. There's 53. This is the red helmet with the line above the ear. There's 53 sevens, 88s, 8 nines. So these are tough cards to get. I feel fortunate to have my hands on them. All right, a couple more here. This one you'll know, and once again, I don't have this in PSA 7 or above yet, but we're getting there. This is card 370. Good old Joe Torre. You remember him? If you don't remember him as a player, you'll remember him in the Yankee dugout, Reggie Jackson era. Just Joe Torre was a force. He'd be chewing all the time and everything. And here's an interesting fact: he hit the very first home run ever on April 12, 1966, at the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. So he's the first person to ever hit a home run there. I'll do that. And he was a National Hall of Fame induction in 2014, along with Tony La Russa, and that was good. And finally, I just love the name, man. This guy was always cool. Always cool. Anyone with this name is cool. 374, Cleet Boyer. Just love the name Cleet. It's just an awesome name. I still love to watch him play. I don't know. He was a good player. Not a great player, but hey, he was named Cleet. It's awesome. But he did do some good things. He was the youngest of 3 brothers to play 4 total. He holds the World Series record for the most career assists by a third baseman, winning 2 titles in 61-62. So he has some notoriety to him. But he had a career fielding percentage of .966, which is pretty darn good. I mean, that's getting close to Brooks Robinson level and things like that. So he was kind of a good player. Numbers-wise, just to close it out, I don't have them yet, and you'll see why. There's only 113 sevens, 163 eights, and 14 nines. So that is our run-through of cards 325 to 374. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate you giving me the time, and I hope you learned something today and got a few tips on some of the cards. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.